All right. Thank you so much, Dave. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm so excited to see active presenters who care so much. I know you guys work very hard to do all that you do, and I am thrilled to be a part of it today. This is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a working session. That means that we're going to be experimenting with something that is off the mainstream of the CCL presentation. Now, why are we doing that? Because as Dave said, we want to experiment with doing a whole lot less explaining and a whole lot more engaging people to act. And that means that when we talk with people, we're seeking with this working session to actually transform how they think. Not just what they know, but how they think. We want them to stop thinking only about climate change with a kind of vague awareness to be urgently concerned. We want them to stop waiting for a solution and become part of the solution and to see themselves not just as taking personal action where they can, changing light bulbs, putting on solar, but advocating for national policy action that is joining the CCL movement. This is different. You're going to hear a different tone, a different set of content, a different style. Some of it you may like, some of it you may not. You may want to adopt some ideas and not others. So I have an assignment for you. I want you to imagine that you are one of your friends who knows about climate change but is not yet involved. Maybe, I'm sure you know many, many people, I know I do, where, they've heard about climate change, they sort of get it, they're open, but they're not actively involved, and they're not really sure what to do. Imagine being that person, and you're hearing this presentation for the first time, and see what you notice. And what I'd like you to notice is what's different about what I say and how I say it. Which differences are really worth keeping and expanding, and how does it influence how you could speak differently about CCL? So again, this is not the mainstream presentation. This is an experiment. You're all part of the experiment. Congratulations. You didn't know that you would be part of important research. But at the end of the session, we're going to ask you what you noticed, what you liked, what you would change, so we can make this even better. Everyone game for that? Give me a head nod. Yeah, excellent. All right. So let's start then a model presentation. And you might want to have a piece of paper or jot down things you notice that you like, you don't like, whatever, and things you want to remember. But remember, you're one of those people who knows a little about climate change and is not yet involved. So, hi everybody, I'm Steve Levin. I'm here at the Dallas Rotary Club as a concerned citizen and as a volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby. I really want to thank you for hosting me today. I appreciate the work that you do to eradicate polio throughout the world. And I know that you use a four-way test that I really endorse, elevating the importance of truth and fairness and goodwill and benefits for all. That same framework can be used to such great advantage to address climate change. And I'm going to show you in the next 15 minutes how we can act together to create a more healthy and vibrant future. Now, my wake-up call around climate change came last year. I've been hearing about climate change for a long time, and I had what you would call a conventional, yeah, that's bad. Let's wait and see what happens. I was a wait-and-see guy. And then came the California wildfires that devastated the forests, decimated the town of Paradise and other cities. And I was 200 miles away from those fires, 200 miles away. But guess what? For a week, I couldn't breathe the air in my own neighborhood. When I had to put on a mask to go outside, I got awake really fast. And I said, I better deal with this greenhouse gas situation now. There's no time to wait, because it touched me personally. It woke me up. And when I started looking around, what I realized is we already know a lot, and we can do things starting today. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what we already know, some of which you might have already heard, and we're gonna explore what we can actually do starting today. And indeed, we do know a lot. And those scientists who research climate change and global warming, they have reached a consensus. 97% of climate scientists around the world agree on the basics. Global warming is real. We're causing it. It's bad. We need to change. That's a big percentage. And the big driver is fossil fuel. We've been consuming and burning so much oil and gas and coal, particularly in recent years, and the trend keeps going up. And this is what creates so many greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And when when carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere, the sun shines its light to warm the earth. That's a good thing. The earth absorbs some of that light and reflects some of it back out to the atmosphere where it's supposed to dissipate. But guess what? With greenhouse gases getting thicker, the atmosphere blanket gets thicker, the heat gets trapped, the planet gets warmer. How much warmer does it get? Well, it turns out the more the carbon dioxide concentration, the greater the temperature. Look at this graph that shows that from the 1880s to now, the variance in temperature has zoomed up right along with the concentration of carbon dioxide, and the trend continues. Well, what does that mean? It means that we're going to have more record-setting temperatures. Do you know the 20 warmest years on record have all been in the past 22 years? On record, the last 22 years. And the last 4 years have been the warmest of all. We're going to have more extreme weather events like those wildfires in California, but also like floods and mudslides and hurricanes that are more extreme. They're not caused by climate change, but they're made more extreme and they're more frequent. Look at how in the 1980s we had about 200 to 300 extreme climate events. In recent years, between 500 and 600, over double. And that means sea level is going to rise. Low-lying areas will be inundated. There'll be more severe droughts. We've had them here in California, but they're all over the world, and they're getting more severe. And the ocean temperature is rising. It's killing the coral, it's threatening vital ecosystems, it's making the ocean more acidic. Now, I know this sounds like doom and gloom, and it is pretty bad. Right here in Texas, by mid-century, we're gonna see over 100 days every year above 95 degrees, fatalities in the thousands, and drastic reductions of crop yields. Now, it's not fun to bring you this news. And I would hesitate to say it unless I thought there was a way out. The fact is that if we continue business as usual, we really are in a very difficult situation. What's called the reference scenario. If we keep going the way we've been going, temperatures will rise over 4 degrees centigrade. Compare that to what is considered the safe scenario of 1.5 degrees centigrade, the bottom green graph. As you can see, we need to make a sharp left turn towards a lower carbon future if we're going to have a planet that we all enjoy. So when I fully realized this, when I woke up to it, I started to look around because I realized we don't have that long. And then I learned how long we have. The latest IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the best scientists in the world that look at this and study it, tell us we have about 12 years to cut global emissions by half if we're not going to have irreversible damage. And the first 6 years are the most critical. The longer you wait, the more you have to remediate later. So I want to do a quick poll. I've been talking for a few minutes. I've shared a lot of facts with you, and I just have one question. And remember, folks, you're in the role of people who are not yet active in climate change, but you've heard something about it. They're your friends and neighbors. By a show of hands, which are you? Would you say, this is mostly new information. I hadn't heard this before. Or would you say, yeah, I've heard most of this before. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. For how many people is it mostly new information? Go ahead and put up your hands. Anybody? Okay, how about for how many of you, I've heard this before? Okay, so look around the room as I am, and you'll see that most of us have heard this before. Now, if we've heard it before, how ready are we to do something about it? How ready are your friends and neighbors, the people you know? How ready are we as a society to address it? In fact, you might think of there being 4 different ways that one could respond to this. So I'm going to ask you again to listen to these 4 ways and tell all of us by a show of hands, which one describes you best. Now, a note to you CCL presenters, please answer like your friends and neighbors who are not yet engaged. Okay, that's your rule. So maybe you've heard this before. Maybe you're saying, I haven't heard that much about climate change, or I don't really think it's much of a problem, number 1. Number 2, I think climate change is real and important, but I'm not doing much about it yet. Number 3 is I have taken some steps to reduce my personal carbon footprint, working here locally, but not a lot more. And the 4th option is I'm actively addressing climate change, I'm making personal choices, and I'm working for a national policy that lowers greenhouse gases. So consider which one describes you best right here in this room as of now. No shame and blame. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Please raise your hand if you're a number 1. I haven't heard much. I don't think it's a problem. Okay, number 2, I think it's real and important. I haven't done much about it. Okay, I see some hands. Number 3, I'm doing some things locally, but not much more. How about number 4? I'm actively addressing it, and I'm working for a national policy. So, welcome to normal. The average person who sees this knows about climate change. They think it's real and important. In fact, 2/3 of Americans, an increasing number, really get it. Climate change is bad. We need to address it. But they're not doing much about it, or if they are, they're doing it locally. Now, it's good to do things locally. And what I woke up to is it's not enough. And that's why I looked around and found Citizens Climate Lobby. Citizens Climate Lobby is one of the largest grassroots climate organizations in the US. It actually has about 480 chapters in the United States and over 500 internationally. It's focused on one thing, building the political will for national climate legislation. And it shows us, you and me and your friends and neighbors, how we can make a difference starting now. And one thing I really love is that it does it with respect and dignity for everybody. It's completely nonpartisan. We see everybody, including those who oppose us, as potential allies in creating the planet that we all want. Now, when I found CCL, I got really curious and I wanted to know what's their solution. So in a minute, I'm going to tell you what CCL proposes. But first, let's think together about what makes a solution good. Like, what would be the criteria for a good climate solution? So, by the way, in a real group presentation, I might ask you, what do you think? In fact, let me ask you, what do you think would be one of the criteria for a good climate solution? Who's got one? Please take yourself off mute and just say it.
It needs to be something global.
It needs to be something really big, large scale for sure. Starting here and having global. What else?
It needs to be something equitable.
It has to be equitable and fair. Right. What else? Yeah.
Other countries have to do their part. It's not just us.
It's not just us. We might set an example, but we want something that will spread or will affect everybody. Absolutely.
It has to effectively reduce carbon pollution.
Bingo. It's got to be effective in actually reducing emissions. So you've hit a lot of great points. We need to drive large-scale change quickly. The scale of the solution needs to match the large scale of the problem, and we have to get going quickly. One thing you didn't mention, but I really believe is important, is that it should use incentives that support free choice rather than a lot of regulation that try to control what people do. I've noticed most people don't like to be controlled. Have you noticed that? It should be fair so that those who can afford it least don't suffer the most. And I like to think of it as sticky. It should be durable. It should be something that doesn't come and go with the next administration. And as you pointed out, Peter, and as we know, it needs to be healthy for the planet. And how about this? It should be healthy for the economy as well. A lot of people think to combat climate change, it's gonna somehow hurt the economy. It isn't necessarily so. So if we think of these 4 criteria as the gold standard, as what we're looking for, is there a solution? Well, as you can guess, I wouldn't ask unless I think we actually have something that meets it. It's called carbon fee and dividend. And it's very simple. It starts by charging a fee on fossil fuels at the source. Carbon, gas, oil, anything that those are used for. There'll be a fee that's charged, so the price of carbon, gas, and oil and everything it makes will go up. No question about it. What happens when the price goes up? Consumers say, hey, wait a minute, it's getting more expensive. Can I save some money here? If I put solar panels on my roof, suddenly I save a lot more money than I did before because electricity from coal is more expensive. If I carpool with Bob, I'm only spending half on gas. I can save some money. Not only that, but the producers, the industry say, hey, can we invest in lower carbon technologies to produce energy and goods that people want, and it won't be so expensive? So that's the carbon fee. Now, the other side is the dividend. All that money gets collected, and the fee starts small in the beginning. It goes up every year to kind of tune people in and give them more of an incentive. All that money is collected, and it's administered, it's distributed back to US households in equal shares. 100% is returned to families. None of it is kept by the government. Now, why do we do that? Well, first of all, it really helps with fairness because lower and middle class people, when the fee goes up, they're going to be hard hit. But if they get a portion of that back as a dividend, it offsets their costs. In fact, analysts show that about 2/3 of Americans in the lower and middle classes, the people in the 2/3 lowest income brackets, will come out even or ahead with this policy. The other reason to give money back to people, can you guess why? It makes it durable and popular. When people get a check every month, they like that policy. The next administration can't come in and say, you know, we're going to save some money, we're going to do it. No, I want my check. I need that to pay my bills. And the less carbon you use, the more that money you get to use for other purposes. So it makes it popular, it makes it durable. It's a simple system that doesn't grow government. Now, we've been talking about this, Citizens Climate Lobby has been talking about carbon fee and dividend for years. And we're slowly making headway. And then we got a big bump. Because right now, in front of Congress, there's a bill that's been introduced called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It's sponsored by Democrats and Republicans. We expect to have a lot more Republicans signing on as this gains momentum. So it's a bipartisan climate solution, and it incorporates the features I just talked about. It's got the carbon fee, it's got the carbon dividend, and it adds a couple of things. Some of you mentioned that this has to have worldwide impact. Well, one of the problems with making things more expensive in the US is people might be tempted to take their factories abroad where they don't have to pay a fee, or to bring in cheap imports that don't pay a fee. So we're actually going to charge that fee at the border. If you import goods, it has to have a fee associated with it, commensurate with the carbon dioxide that it brings in. The other accommodation here is we're going to hold off on some of the regulations that business objects to, so that carbon fee and dividend has a chance to work its magic through price signals. So for 10 years, we're going to emphasize helping people to save money and giving them a price incentive rather than regulating them. So this meets a lot of great standards. It's going to be effective. It's estimated that it'll reduce US emissions by 40% in the next few years. It's good for people by keeping them healthy and by giving them money back. It's good for the economy. It will actually add jobs, not take away jobs, because low carbon industries will flourish. it's bipartisan, which means we can all get behind this together. And because it doesn't grow government, it's revenue neutral. And a lot of people like that. So that's the overview of what's being proposed. But you know what? It is not going to happen unless Congress says we're for it. And in this environment, it takes a lot of political will to act on climate. That's why CCL emphasizes its laser-focused mission to build the political will for a livable world. And we are gaining momentum, but we can't do it without you and me and our friends and neighbors adding their voices. So in a moment, I'm going to pause. I want to ask you, what is your personal action plan? What would you like to do to address this problem? I suggest 2 tracks. First, I'd love for you to continue to act locally, doing whatever you're doing, whether it be using light bulbs that use less energy, getting an electric car, doing solar, or just reducing your footprint. It's all good. We need that. And not only that, it gives you the moral authority to ask a lot of Congress to do their part. But the second track, the one that almost no one raised their hand for yet, is the one that I'm excited about and where I want to especially invite you to become an advocate for an effective national policy. So how do you do that? How do any of us bring our advocacy forward? Well, there's some very simple ways through Citizens Climate Lobby and maybe some on your own. So the first is join an informational session held by CCL that describes a lot more than I've been able to in these few minutes. Every Wednesday, we have a call. You can register for it. Join us. We'll tell you a lot more. The second thing you can do is find out more about the Energy Innovation Act. You can even be an endorser. You can go to this website. And by the way, this information is on the checklist at your table. All these ideas are at your table, so you can consider which ones you want to do. And you can endorse the act. You can find out more about it. You can also connect with a local CCL chapter. Remember those 480 some odd chapters all across the US? There's one near you. In fact, there's one right here in North Dallas that's very strong. If you fill out the sheet at your table, we'll get you plugged into your local groups outreach today. We'd love to have you. They need you, and you don't need to do this alone. Another great thing to do is make an introduction to your network. Open a door for CCL to speak to your groups and organizations. Who knows who will be interested in endorsing this legislation? The more people that endorse and add their voice, the better. So introduce us, and we'll give them a talk like this or something in more depth. And you might win the lottery on this one. And all expense paid by you, visit to Congress. Every June, we get together for a national conference. Over 1,000 volunteers gather, and we storm Capitol Hill, visiting congressional offices. It is so much fun. We swarm the Hill, and we visit with Democrats, Republicans, fans, opponents, everybody, getting the word out. Join us in June. So, I'm going to stop here. You've heard a lot. I'd like to ask you these questions. I'd like you to think about it a little bit and then turn to a neighbor. First, what did you learn or maybe relearn today that's important to you or is energizing? There's a lot of ideas here. Which one stood out? And if you're not sure, ask your neighbor to share, well, what stood out for you? What actions will you take? Which actions are local and personal to you? And how can you help the national policy agenda move forward, either with or without CCL? And finally, I'd love to know what questions you have. I've talked a while. I'm sure a lot has come up. I'd be happy to take all your questions and let's have a discussion. So go ahead now and turn to a neighbor. Talk through these questions. I'll give you about 3 minutes. Then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion. So let's say I do that. We talk about your insights and questions. I say thank you, and we're done. So let's give a big hand for you, your friends and neighbors. Very good. All right. That's it, folks. That's the provocation. And we're now going to move to debrief. And this is where I really would like you to be very actively engaged. So we're going to take you off mute, or you can unmute yourself.